Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Saveourselvesproductions and Consulting. My name is Lawrence.watson, and my producer is Pedro Moreno. And we are going to be doing a series of lectures and presentations featuring some leaders and up-and-coming leaders in the community that we rarely get to see highlighted and focused on. We usually are waiting for the same old characters, the same old players to come forward, but I have a different vision and idea of what we need to do. And I think we need to interview people from various different backgrounds that make up the larger Boston community. We also need to have people I want to have on this show that really are willing to tell the truth and look at the hard truth and use themselves as a prototype and an example of obstacles they've overcome. There are people out here today listening to these podcasts who've had similar struggles, and they want to tell their story, and there's power in articulating the words. In articulating the words and telling your story is very healing. And so Save Ourselves Productions' motto is, if we don't save ourselves, no one else will. And so today we have a very special guest, and she's going to tell part of her story, and we're going to just have a wonderful informal dialogue. And I hope that we get to accomplish all the objectives we've set forth to accomplish in this interview. So I'm going to have her to introduce herself to you and tell you a bit about her background and where she's from, and just give you a few pointers about who she is, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, my name's Luzmila Moreno, 29. I'm originally from small town Texas. Moved to Boston maybe like 6 years ago. Got a master in science in counseling psychology from Northeastern. So I'm a mental health counselor here in Boston. Hispanic. Have a wonderful twin brother named Pedro.
Yes, and Pedro Moreno, who works with me on these podcasts. So this is a real treat to have you here as a part of the family. Let me ask you something. When I traveled across country to drive to California from Massachusetts, we went through Texas. We also went through Tennessee, and we couldn't wait to get our asses out of both of those states because it was fascist. It was horrendous. Mm-hmm. First of all, we went through Tennessee. We couldn't rent a hotel room. And all the people who, I'm just being straight up, all the people who owned the hotels were Indians. And when we pulled up, I was helping one of my friends drive across country, and he was a musician moving to Los Angeles. And we just couldn't believe that we couldn't rent a place in Tennessee, so we had to drive. We drove through Oklahoma, we drove through Tennessee, and then we hit Texas. And we broke our notion that we don't eat beef. We went and we pigged out, and we ate this beef, and then we threw up all night in the hotel because we really overdid it. But I found Texas to be a very deep place for a number of reasons. So tell me, what was your experience like growing up in Texas? Tell us a bit about the area of Texas you grew up in, and how was that for a Latina young woman in the area you grew up in? I'm sure your family, as I know Pedro, and I've heard you talk about your parents, your grandparents, you had a wonderful family life. Yeah. But tell me beyond that for those people listening.
Yeah, so my dad, he moved from Peru when he was in his 20s, and moved to a small city in Texas, and kind of that's where everything started. And so growing up, we didn't see many people that looked like us in schools. And then we eventually moved to a smaller town in Texas, very small, where the population was mostly Caucasian. My brother and I, maybe one other Hispanic, one black person in the school system. And so growing up in that kind of environment, I felt like it was difficult because I would hear my the other students, people I would consider maybe friends, throughout junior high to high school, experiencing a lot of microaggressions.
Yes.
I feel like had it not been for the support that I received from my family growing up, and seeing how our culture was awesome, it was great, nothing to be ashamed of. Had it not been for that, then maybe it would have been a lot difficult for me to grow up in a place where people didn't look like me.
Right.
So thankfully, I had my family that looked like me and represented all the great values, and you know, and so it made. I remember hearing in the hallway sometimes, oh, that beaner, or you know, talking about other people, not about me, but still hearing it and still having that feeling like they could be easily talking about me. Um, or whenever I would work, I worked in the small town too. I worked at
Yes.
Pizza Hut and all these different places in the small town, and you know, a lot of times I felt, I would be discriminated against because I was the only one that looked like myself. And
Yeah.
especially on Sunday mornings when you would think that the people leaving church would be the nicest to you, they were always the meanest. And I didn't feel like the way they acted towards me were the same as the other people that worked with me. And I don't know, it just made me feel, I don't know, like I was less than.
It's so amazing to hear so many people of color and people from different backgrounds are rarely asked to talk about this. And so when they do talk about it, they start to pause and think, because as you're thinking about it, it takes you back and it reflects on situations, microaggressions, as you use the term aptly, that happened that you just overlooked because you had no time to stop. You just had to keep going and persevering. But then you went on. You're in the sciences, and so tell me about graduate school and what you were interested in studying and how that's all kind of materialized.
Yeah. Actually, whenever I had moved here, I think I was into my first year of grad school. Somebody from my undergrad had come up and they were visiting, and he found out that I was living here, and he actually works at the university. Um, and so I remember one time I was showing him around Boston, and he was like, "Oh, so I heard that you got accepted to grad school and stuff here." And I was like, "Yeah, I go to Northeastern." He was like, "Yeah, I was talking to so and so, and I told him I was visiting you or seeing you in Boston since I was already here, and he couldn't believe that you got into Northeastern." And I was like, What makes him have that idea?
Right.
Like I don't understand where that came from. I was always, you know, very focused on my work and stuff at MSU, very
Absolutely.
involved. I was like,
Hmm.
just because it's Northeastern doesn't mean that a Latina woman can't get accepted into it
It's
from
very
small town
interesting.
Texas.
When I was a graduate school at Cornell, and upon finishing graduate school, the dean, who was a Jewish man, decided he was sick of all of these old white people working in the school. So he went on a one-man campaign to recruit a young graduate student of color to be a dean in the liberal arts,
Mm-hmm.
the dean for the senior class. And so he interviewed me, and I finally got the job. Fast forward, I was in the job for about 6 years, and then I was recruited to Harvard University for a deanship, administrative deanship. And one of my colleagues, white woman who was one of the deans, she went to a conference in Boston, and she met people in Boston and said, "Can I speak with you?" She met some black women. "I have a young colleague who's been accepted to a job at Harvard. I'm really worried about him. I don't think he's going to make it. I'm going to give you his phone number. Could you please call him and just check on him once in a while? Because I think that Harvard shouldn't have hired him."
Wow.
So this black woman, my late mentor, Dr. Loretta Williams, she called me. I didn't know this woman. She took me out to lunch, and we were talking. And I was sitting there laying it down about what had already happened to me at Harvard and how I was dealing with it. And she said under her breath almost, "Oh, you'll be fine." So I said, "What?" "Excuse me." She said, "Oh, you'll be fine." I said, "What do you mean by that?" She said, "Well, one of your colleagues, she called me, and we were at a conference, and she told me to look out for you because she didn't think you were ready for this." I think that kind of attitude is just pervasive, and I'm glad to hear you speak on it, because we have many young Latino women and Latino men and Latina women who, well, today I could say both, uh, who um, who really don't know how to deal with that. They don't have the conflict resolution skills to deal with that. How have you dealt with it?
Um, For me, because I've been able to read about it, know about it, my family has always been very perseverant.
Yes.
And so that kind of was instilled in me already from the beginning. And so, I know what my abilities are. I know that I'm a competent person. So,
Right.
you know, I just let it go. I hear it, and that motivates me.
I understand. Now, in knowing you and knowing Pedro, I know that you have faced some very significant challenges, medical challenges. So I want you to share that with the audience, your journey. Everybody has a journey that they go on, and there's an old Negro spiritual that I used to have black women who worked in the corporate world, would call me up on the phone and say, "Hi, Larry," and I was a dean at at Harvard. "I'm getting ready to go into this meeting with these white men," and she said, "Could you please sing that song over the phone for me? I don't feel no ways tired." And the words of the song, and I was so sure, and I'd sing, "I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me the road would be easy, but I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me." Tell us about your road medically and what you've been through, because I'm very proud of you
Thank you.
and where you are now in your life.
Thank you. So it was about 10 months ago. My brother and I, we had a great time. We went to Greece. But on that Greece trip, I started to feel some numbness around my pubic area. And I was like, well, this is weird. And I thought it was just a medication that I had taken. I was like, oh, I'm going to stop taking it. But the sensation never came back. And then started to feel pain, a lot of nerve pain. It was basically being stabbed with a knife is basically what it felt like. And I couldn't sit anymore, couldn't walk anymore. I would go to work. Even with a lot of pain, I was still going to work. And I do a lot of walking and a lot of commuting there with the train. And it just started getting really bad. I would, after my groups, since I'm a therapist. After my groups, I would go into the office, and my colleagues would see me. I would just lay on the floor, on my stomach, and I would go to the ER, and they dismissed me, and they said, "Oh, it looks like you have maybe you have an internal bruise or something like that." And so I was like, okay. And so I decided to go to my PCP maybe like a week and a half, 2 weeks after I came back from Greece. And luckily, my PCP from Fenway Health, and I love Fenway Health, they're very supportive and
Mm-hmm.
inclusive. Right away, she had me take x-rays, MRIs, and she calls me up. I think my MRI was on a Monday. A Wednesday, she calls me up. I was at home, luckily on my day off, in pain in bed. And she has a serious tone, and usually my interactions with her has always been very upbeat, very friendly.
Right.
And so I already heard the tone in her voice.
Oh, gosh.
And she says, "Luzmila, I need to talk to you. It's in regards to the MRI. I got it now. If you could please come into the office so that I can give you details, specifics." And I said, "Sure, I'm off. Let me go ahead and head out over there right now." So I get there, and I'm sitting there, and she looks at me in my face, and very compassionately, she tells me, you have a tumor, and we think it's a neurological cancer, and it's the size of a big orange, in right where your sacrum is at. And automatically, I started crying, not because I was scared, because our Peruvian grandmother had just passed away from pancreatic cancer, and seeing her process, and I just remember it. And I started crying because my first thought was, my brother can't not have his twin sister. That was my main reason that I started crying, was just thinking the thought of my brother moving forward in a life without his twin sister, since we've shared the womb, we shared the crib, we shared everything, we lived together. And so, my empathy towards my brother was what overwhelmed me. And so she said, is there anybody here that's with you that can kind of be with you as I'm giving you details? And I was like, yeah, my brother, he's in the waiting room. And she's like, you can bring him in. So then she proceeds to tell us again that I have cancer. And my brother, my brother's not very emotional. And I could
Mm-hmm.
see in his eyes that it was something that had impacted him.
Yes.
And hearing my brother, like, he told me, he was like, why couldn't it have been me? He was like, you've worked so hard. You went to school and you've pushed yourself. And why couldn't it have been me? I was like, Pedro, it's fine. I was like, I got this, So it ended up being non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer. And so I had many rounds of chemo. My hair before cancer was down to my butt. And so, I had to cut that off, and eventually I had to shave it off because it started to come out in chunks.
Yeah, and Pedro shaved his off
And
too.
my brother, he's, a musician. They would say that he's like the Latino Kenny G because he had curly, long hair. And so when I said initially, whenever I told my family, I'm going to have to shave my head eventually, my brother was like, I'm going to shave my head with you. And I didn't believe him at first.
And before I knew you had the cancer, we forbid Pedro to cut his hair.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
He kept saying, we said, no, that's stage. Musicians have to have hair. Women and men, hair makes it. But at any rate, it was an incredible, wonderful, courageous, powerful act of love when he cut his hair along with you. It was very powerful.
It was very touching because I knew how much his hair meant to him and how long he had worked to get it that long, because his hair doesn't grow as fast as mine.
Little dig,
but his hair was beautiful, and I felt really bad, but it really touched me because for me, I don't know, this love that I have for my brother. It's just like, very profound because, we shared everything together. Right. And so whenever I cut the ponytail, and my mom shaved the hair, and my dad shaved his hair too. It was just, that family support was so much for me.
Yeah, I want to emphasize something here. When people go to the doctor and they're going to be getting news, it is so important, if you have someone, that it's essential that you have someone to accompany you to the doctor.
Definitely.
And so many people don't do that, either because they don't have anyone, or one of the things that happens in Black and Latino families is we're so into keeping my business private, and we don't talk about it, and that is the worst thing that can happen. Because in a time of a crisis like that, you can't possibly remember everything that the doctor said to you. So it is appropriate for those listening to, when you're going to a doctor and you sense in the doctor's voice that this is not going to be like a pro forma session, it's something quite serious, that you have the courage and the wherewithal to take someone with you. Definitely.
Or if you can't take somebody with you, my doctor actually, right after she told me the news, she said, there's actually a therapist on my team. She's like, if you don't mind, can you check in with her, because this is very shocking news. And I was in shock, and I'm a therapist myself, and I've never received therapy. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm definitely in for it. And that is something that is very stigmatized within, the Black and the Hispanic community.
Yes.
It's that mental health piece.
And that's a serious problem for us, is mental health, baby.
Yeah.
In our families.
And so I was like, you know what? Yes. And my therapist, I started seeing this therapist, a Black woman, great. It's very fluid, the relationship. It's she's great. She's great. And so,
is she through Fenway?
She's also through Fenway.
I see. Okay, because the other thing I was going to say about your story, there's a real shortage of Black and Latino therapists and psychiatrists in Boston and in the profession. It's a really difficult and serious matter. And I'll just, for perfect disclosure, I have been having some real serious issues around my mother, who has dementia, and my aunt, and all the family dynamics, and preparing to deal with that. And I've talked to my general practitioner about it. And really, As I've tried to find someone, it's been extremely difficult to find
Definitely. And
someone.
I would expect otherwise being in
I know in
Boston.
Boston.
But for example, I'm the only Spanish speaking therapist at the psychiatric hospital that I worked at.
I want everybody to hear that again. So, in fact, when we begin to look at issues like microaggressions and other kind of things that Black and Latino and poor people go through, it is very difficult to go and talk to someone when you've got to school them on your own cultural background and things that
Definitely.
they just don't understand.
Exactly. And for me, at first I started out as a tech at the psychiatric hospital when I first moved here from Boston, and um, thankfully there were some of us techs that could speak Spanish. But throughout the times, those people went on to bigger roles within the hospital or moved away. And so there wasn't really anybody that could translate for some of the Spanish
Right,
speaking people,
right.
patients. And so I noticed as a therapist, they would have them scattered all over the hospital, and it made it even worse. And so, because I remember speaking to Latino patients, and they just felt like, the space wasn't welcoming, or they
It
just
wasn't
didn't feel
conducive. It
safe.
wasn't welcoming. Right,
Right.
right.
And so I told my boss when I became a group therapist, I told him, I know that I'm the only Spanish speaking person, um, Latina here. Why don't we do this? Why don't maybe while I'm here, take advantage of that?
Right.
Like make all, the people that are doing admissions, why don't you have them all admitted to one unit so
Right.
that when I'm doing my group therapy, I can also be translating it into Spanish and bring Spanish materials
Absolutely.
so that, they feel a part that for them to feel a part of their own treatment. Right? Because, if they don't even know what's going on, this is not even their language, they're not seeing people that look like them, they're being shoved with medications, and they're not having that other essential part, which is the talk therapy, then it's not going to be an environment that's going to be helpful for them
Right,
if they
right.
can't talk about what's going on.
Exactly.
And so he was like, you're right. I'll tell the admissions people. And so right before I got sick, actually, is when this was starting to
Oh
happen.
Lord.
And so, they were starting to bring some of the Latinos into one unit. And so, it walking into a unit and seeing, 4, 5, 6 Latinos that were coming into my group and being a part of the discussion, being a part of their own treatment, it was very rewarding, I feel like, because
Yes.
they were able to talk about what was going on and not just stay in their rooms. And and it made a difference. You could see in their treatment that since they were involved in their own treatment, they felt like they could advocate for themselves and ask
Right.
questions and be a part of the discussion and
Right.
know more about mental health. And it's not so taboo like I thought it was.
Right.
And so it was very healthy, I felt like.
So you were doing that work still while you were contending with your cancer?
It was right before I got diagnosed.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't even ask for extra pay. They didn't give me more time to put together the
Right,
materials. It's just
right.
something that I just did,
Right.
just so that, people could feel like they were involved in their own treatment. And so then I went on medical leave
Yes.
with the cancer, and I haven't been back.
I see. So tell me a little bit before, because we're going to ask the public watching to help us, because we need your help on a project and a GoFundMe project that you have put up. But before we go there, tell us a bit about the courage you found and how you dealt with all of the mechanisms and all of the stuff that went with the treatment you needed to get that saved your life and eradicated the cancer.
So I went through the treatments.
Were they painful? Were they?
Oh,
Because there's so much mystery behind people getting treatment for cancer. Cancer is not the bad word it once was. People survive cancer.
mhm.
You're a living example of that. But in the Black and Latino community, for many years, we wouldn't say the word diabetes. At one point when your mother and your father were younger, if you had diabetes, it was an embarrassment. I'm a diabetic. You didn't tell people you had diabetes. And Black people says things like in Latino, I got a little sugar. and that's how they would minimize it. And so, tell us a bit about how that all became demystified, but at the same time, it must have been, whoa, I'm going into this chamber, I'm doing this. What did that entail?
Well, for me, because it was very fresh for me with my grandma passing away of
Yes,
cancer.
yes,
And I'm named after her. For me, maybe it wasn't the same as other people with hearing cancer
yes,
or being shy about saying that they have
right,
cancer. For me, I have cancer and I'm
right,
not ashamed of it because I just
right.
saw a warrior put in, blood and tears, and
Oh,
and so that in itself inspired me and motivated. And so,
yes,
I wasn't shy saying I have cancer. It wasn't something that I didn't want to talk about. I feel like it's very important to be open about these things,
right,
because what if there's somebody out there that's struggling with, what to say, what to think about it. And so if I can be open and talk about it, then it creates this open discussion. And so then maybe my fears aren't so big anymore.
right,
Um,
exactly.
and so knowing that my grandma had just struggled and, fought hard with the cancer, for me, it was not like an honor or something, but something like,
Right,
you know, she did it. I'm going to put in the effort and I'm going to do
absolutely.
it too. And so that's what kind
Well,
of,
it seems that you fought the good fight, and God willing, everything is fine. You're getting good reports. But now comes the reality of being broke. Now comes the reality of having all these bills and being on short term medical leave, being on disability. We know that our medical system of health coverage is just, I almost said a really bad word, but it's really bad.
yeah,
And we
so
we
many
send,
cuts.
we tend to be in a better situation in the state of Massachusetts and the Commonwealth, but there are many people who are just devastated by an illness like this. I just read a thing the other day that a man that had COVID got like an 80-page bill to $1.8 million
Million?
or
Yeah, I saw
something.
that too.
So I'm saying to you now, we're going to reach out to my audience and people that I know and friends that work all over the city, work in the mayor's office, work in the governor's office, people who are in the medical profession. I'm going to ask you to indicate what you're doing because you got to pay your bills and you found yourself in a situation of being denied your
Disability.
disability, which is outrageous to me, folks, which is outrageous, but everybody has to handle it the way they have to handle it. But we need you all's help in terms of advocacy. So tell us where you stand now, and you've decided to post a GoFundMe. We hope you all will help by supporting it. But at the same time, we could also use advice as to how you go about advocating for
Yeah.
yourself. So tell us where you are
So
now.
in December, I had sent in the paperwork for disability. It wasn't even until late May that I received a denial. They said, your age, maybe you can't do what you did before, but you're still able to lift 10 pounds. So you're denied. And so the second time around, I had my doctor, I did an appeal. My doctor sent in a letter. They said, Luzmila Marino, I'm a medical professional at Mass General Hospital. She's just gone through a very aggressive chemotherapy. There's a lot of side effects to this. She's also very high risk for the COVID-19. We definitely recommend her to get disability. And so that was sent through. Come to find out, I'm very immunocompromised, and I contracted COVID-19.
I want everybody to hear this story now. I want you to hear this story. Go ahead.
And so it started out with muscle aches. My head was pounding. I had the fever. I went in. They said, well, maybe it's pneumonia. I got tested. It was false. And so then they gave me some medication. Went on my way. Next week, still the same symptoms. They said, come back in, test me again. False. So the next week, it's getting even worse. And so then I go back into this time they said go to the ER because I had just been going to the cancer center. And so then they said, yes, you did test positive for the coronavirus. And so I stayed for 4 days. They let me leave. They said, "Oh, well, you're young. You could probably kick this off. Just stay in your room for like 2 weeks, quarantine. But however, if any symptoms become worse, please let us know. Contact us right away." And I said, "Okay." And in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna fight this. Just that fighter spirit in me. And so I quarantined in my room. And 4 or 5 days later, it got to the point where I just became so weak. I could barely breathe. My appetite was no longer there. I just didn't. The drive cough was so bad that it just knocked me on my feet.
Oh,
I started to just going to the bathroom was just so draining that I started to just. It's a little embarrassing, but
no, go
what
ahead.
I did was I got this big bowl that we had, and so I started to use the pee in it
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
just couldn't. I couldn't even lift my head to drink water. Um, and my brother actually told me yesterday, as an outsider looking in, and in my head, the reason why I didn't ask for more help was I just got discharged from the hospital. They just told me there's nothing they can really do for coronavirus. And so in my head, I was like, I have to just fight it. I just have to, just fight. But I started to lose that oxygen. I was no longer able to breathe. And so my brother told me yesterday that looking in, being the outsider view, he said that I just looked horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many times when he'd ask me if, can I take you to the ER? And I would say, there's nothing they can do for me. And so I just kind of felt helpless. I didn't know that, it just didn't occur to me that maybe I needed oxygen or maybe they can do this because the first time around my breathing wasn't so bad.
Right.
And so finally it got to the point where like I just couldn't breathe. I just couldn't breathe. And so what I did was I called. And the sad thing is, I first called and I asked them, will I be charged if I call an ambulance? Because I
Oh,
was so scared. I was like, I'm already not really working. This disability already denied me. Like, I'm going to be with all this medical bills. I still have like, school to pay for, and so um, I was just like, you know what, I need to go. So the ambulance comes. I'm desperate for air. Basically, it's like a fish out of water. In the ambulance ride, the thought already occurs, am I going to have to say goodbye to the people that I love on an iPad or something?
oh God.
And I just hear the sirens, and that's basically all that I remember from that ride.
Wow.
I get to the ER. Immediately, they take action. They're hooking up IVs. I have a port in my chest for where I received the chemotherapy. They connect that. They put another IV in my arm. They're doing an ultrasound of my heart, X-ray, CT scans. Finally, the doctor comes in after a few hours of being in the ER, and she tells me, "You definitely have the. I already had double pneumonia." And so double pneumonia, COVID-19, I had acute congestive heart failure, acute
Oh my
respiratory failure with
God.
hypoxia. And she says, your lungs look really bad. She said, there might be a possibility that you're going to be on a ventilator if I can't stabilize your oxygen right now. So I stay in the ER for a few hours. Finally, they're able to kind of balance it a little bit. And so they send me up to a COVID unit. And right away, there's doctors that come in and they said, we're doing a clinical trial right now. Not everybody is getting it, but if you want to be a part of it, you definitely meet all the criteria for it. It's for an antiviral medicine called, I don't remember what it's called, remdesivir or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that will give you for 5 days, and hopefully it can cut the amount of time that you're showing these symptoms.
Right.
And so I said, sign me up, coach. I'm ready. I was
Right.
like, if you can use me for anything, please do, because I'm all about research.
Right.
And so they did, and it was, I thought I was going to die. It was also very surreal, life changing, because all of those thoughts come into your head. Like you reflect back, and I
Right.
couldn't even use the bathroom on my own. My body had already been so deconditioned. I was using the bathroom in a bedpan. A 29-year-old weak on a bed using a bedpan. The nurses wiping me, and I just felt,
Oh,
I was so out of control of my body. And so COVID-19 hits anybody.
yes.
A lot of the traveling nurses told me she had a boyfriend, 30 years old, works out every day, very healthy. He's also a nurse. But the COVID-19 hit him, and it hit him, threw him on the ground, and he's still not even working. It's been like 3 months. Um, and so it hits anybody, And so if you think that, oh, I work out, I'm healthy, think otherwise, and please take precaution, use your masks, use your hand sanitizers,
Right.
because it's prevention.
Absolutely.
A lot of people back home, I'm seeing pictures of, full sidewalks of people walking, restaurants, bars, going to shopping, nobody wearing masks. And so, and we're also seeing a rise in people that are, are contracting the coronavirus back home. And they think it's like, oh, it's a hoax. It's just
I know.
it's not happening. And I'm like, yes, it is happening. I'm not going to lie about this.
Well, I'm just so overwhelmed and happy that you have come to speak with us. I think it's important to put a face with the condition and with the disease and see that she has survived. She's doing very well, but she still is facing some challenges. And those challenges are getting the medical profession, the healthcare profession, to help her at this point along with her finances. So you've started a GoFundMe page, and I want all of you listening out there to donate to that because it's the right thing to do when we see people who have persevered and stand for so much in our community. But secondly, I want some people to write me at Lawrence.watson, Lawrence.watson at gmail.com and tell me your recommendations because you've been denied
Twice.
Your unemployment and your
The disability.
your disability.
Mm-hmm.
And there's got to be something that can be done about this. And so we've talked a little off camera about some of the things I recommended. But we want some of you out there who are health professionals and people who work in this field to give us some pointers because you really need their help. So tell us about the GoFundMe page and how people can contact you.
Sure. So the GoFundMe page was created by two of my greatest friends from undergrad. One was my professor of Spanish, and my other friend was a criminal justice major, as I was in undergrad. And they got together. They were like, you know what, Luz, she's the type of person that has asked people for support, but moral support. So my friend Linda, she's very like, no, you need to do this and this. So she said, Luz, I know that you just wanted the moral support, but we got to be real about this. You have medical bills, you need to pay rent, food, and we need to do this. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so she made the GoFundMe page, wrote out a description, and posted it about 5 days ago. And some of my friends have already shared it on Facebook, on Instagram. I don't know anywhere else really to share it to.
Well, we're going to share it at some other places. So give them the address or the way that people can make donations. Do you have that information? If not, we'll add it later on during the post editing of this video.
I mean, we could definitely add like a link to the GoFundMe page.
Please.
But I also have, there's also other people that have reached out to me and said that they would prefer to donate through like Venmo or the Cashapp.
Right.
And so I have both of those things. And so some of my friends have already donated through Venmo.
I see.
So
how is your email account or phone? Give something that they can have. We can post that later on. We'll post all of that later on. But I want you all to please act because that's how we help one another. And I really appreciate your being here with us today and having the courage to share a very painful but at the same time a very incredibly enlightening story because you're a survivor and you're a fighter. And we have more people that we need to be fighters. That doesn't mean because you're a fighter that one has to always come off as a fighter. But I know I'm a fighter, but sometimes fighters need help. Recently something happened to me that didn't involve medical stuff, and a group of students came forward and started a petition I knew nothing about. And it was very heartwarming, no matter what happens. It was very heartwarming to know that there are people out there,
Yeah.
and that I believe the universe and the spirit always sends people into your life. So I think that this is no accident that you're the first person appearing on my podcast before we really blow it up and do the things we want to do. So I want to thank you for being here with us
Thank
today.
you for allowing me to be here.
Well,
and tell
it's
my
been
story.
great to tell your story. And this is Lawrence Watson. You can contact me at Lawrence.watson@gmail.com or Saveourselvesproductions@gmail.com. Please support us and send us your recommendations and suggestions, and we'll keep you posted as to how all of the outcome here
Thank
is.
you.
And we'll post at the end of this podcast all of the information so you too can make a donation. So thank you all for listening and to being with us. Once again, this is Lawrence Watson, Lawrence Larry Watson, signing off from Save Ourselves Productions. If we don't save ourselves, no one else will. Good night.